Long before you ever get to Socrates, Plato, or Aristotle, a group of really revolutionary thinkers were trying to answer the biggest question there is. What is all this stuff around us, and how does it actually work? So today, we're going to dive into two of the very first, absolutely brilliant, and totally different blueprints for the entire universe. All right, let's get into it.
Just think about the challenge the pre-Socratic philosophers set for themselves. They were basically the first people to say, hey, let's put the stories about gods and monsters aside for a second and try to figure out reality using just our own minds. They wanted a logical explanation for everything.
But, they hit a snag almost right away, a really big one. We can call it the crisis of change. You had these earlier thinkers, especially from what's called the Eleatic school, who made this really compelling argument that reality has to be just one single thing, eternal and totally unchanging. But, just look around. The world is obviously full of change and movement and all kinds of different stuff. So how can both of these things possibly be true?
And this is the real head-scratcher they were wrestling with. If you buy the basic rule of logic that you can't just get something from absolute nothingness, well then change itself starts to look impossible, right? How does a tiny seed become a giant tree? How does the food you eat become part of you? How does anything become something else?
So our first crack at solving this comes from a guy named Anaxagoras, and he offers what we'll call solution number 1, an intelligent universe. Now, this was a seriously cool-headed philosopher from Ionia, and he brought his pretty radical ideas right to the center of the action, Athens. He looked at this puzzle of change and came up with a very clever and honestly a very strange explanation.
Anaxagoras' big aha moment really started with a simple fact of biology. We eat stuff like bread and water, and somehow our bodies turn that into all these complex different things: hair, bone, blood, you name it. And if you stick to that rule, nothing can come from nothing, then all that stuff can't just be popping into existence. It had to be there already, somehow.
So Anaxagoras made this incredible logical leap. He said the only way this could possibly work is if tiny invisible bits of hair and bone and blood, and really of everything else, were already inside the bread and water we eat. Our bodies don't create anything new. They just act like a sorting facility, separating and gathering what's already there.
And this led him to this kind of wild theory of matter. It's called homoemeria. The idea is that every single thing contains a little bit of every other thing. So that piece of wood in front of you? It's not just wood. It also has microscopic bits of gold and water and bone in it. The only reason we call it wood is because the wood particles are the most dominant thing in that particular mix. It's a mind-bending idea for sure, but it's a perfectly logical solution to the problem of change.
Okay, so, great. The universe started as this giant, motionless, chaotic soup where everything was mixed up with everything else. But what stirred the pot? What was the spark that kicked off the whole process of separating things out to create the world that we see today? Anaxagoras needed some kind of force, something to get the cosmic engine running.
And his answer was his most brilliant, most original idea, nous, which basically means mind. The way he describes nous is just fascinating. It's not a god, not in the way we usually think of one. It's this infinite, pure, all-knowing intelligence that's completely separate from all the matter it organizes. Its whole job is just to know things and to start motion.
The creation story that comes out of this is this beautiful, step-by-step process. First, you've got the silent, primordial mix. Then, nous gives it one initial push, starting a cosmic vortex. This whirlpool starts spinning faster and faster, expanding outwards, and the centrifugal force starts sorting everything out. The heavy, dense stuff clumps in the middle to become the earth, while the light, hot stuff gets flung out to the edges to become the stars. For Anaxagoras, the universe is intelligent, it's organized, it's purpose-driven.
Okay, so Anaxagoras gave us a universe with a mind. But what if you don't need one? What if you could build a universe from scratch without any intelligence at all? Well, right around the same time, another philosopher named Leucippus was working on a totally different blueprint, our solution number 2, a mechanical universe. And his cosmos needed no mind, no purpose, and no divine spark. It just needed two shockingly simple ideas.
Leucippus starts by throwing down the gauntlet right at Anaxagoras' idea of infinite divisibility. Now, he was probably influenced by thinkers like Zeno, whose paradoxes made it seem like if you can just keep cutting things up forever, motion itself becomes logically impossible. So Leucippus said, no, there has to be a limit. There's got to be a point where you get to a fundamental particle that you just can't cut any smaller.
And he called these particles atoms. which in Greek, atomos, literally means uncuttable. For him, these atoms are the real, unchanging reality. They're eternal, they're solid, and they come in an infinite number of different shapes and sizes. They are the fundamental being that all those earlier philosophers were looking for.
But here is where Leucippus pulls an absolute genius move. For atoms to move around, they need empty space to move through, right? So Leucippus makes this completely revolutionary claim. He says that nothing, the void, empty space, is just as real as something. He called the atoms being and the void not being, and said, you know what? Both of them exist. This flew in the face of what earlier philosophers said, and it was the absolute key that unlocked his entire system.
There's this fantastic analogy to help you wrap your head around how atomism works. How do you get all the incredible complexity of our world from just these two simple things, atoms and the void? Well, it's the same way you can write every tragedy, every comedy, every story imaginable, with just the same handful of letters in an alphabet. It's not about the ingredients themselves, it's about how they're combined, how they're arranged, and where they are.
And this quote, this really gets to the heart of his mechanical universe. There's no grand plan here, no noose pulling the strings. Everything that happens is just the direct result of a previous cause. One atom bumping into another, they hook together, they break apart. It's a universe that runs on the cold, hard, unbreakable laws of necessity and physics, not on some grand cosmic intelligence.
So what we've got here aren't just a couple of old theories from ancient Greece. No, these are two completely fundamental blueprints for how to look at reality itself. And this is a debate that would echo for thousands of years.
So let's just break it down, side by side. With Anaxagoras, you have a top-down universe, guided by an intelligent mind, where change is really just a sorting process. With Leucippus, you get a bottom-up universe, built from the simple bumps and grinds of atoms and a void, where change is just rearrangement, all governed by pure necessity. It's mind versus matter. It's purpose versus mechanics.
And you have to understand, the impact of these two clashing worldviews is almost impossible to overstate. They didn't just disappear. They laid down the two main tracks that Western philosophy, and eventually science, would follow for the next 2,500 years. You can literally trace the family tree of these ideas through history. The whole concept of a purpose-driven, intelligently ordered universe that got picked up and massively expanded by Plato and Aristotle, and it basically dominated Western thought for centuries. Meanwhile, the idea of a mechanical, materialist universe, atomism, it kind of went underground for a while, but it was famously revived and eventually became one of the key assumptions of the scientific revolution.
And that leaves us with this huge question, one that is just as powerful today as it was in 450 BCE. Is the universe, at its core, a story of purpose and design, or is it a story of chance and necessity? Is there a mind behind it all, or is it just the elegant, inevitable result of physical laws playing out on their own? This ancient Greek debate is, in so many ways, a conversation we are still having right now.